She thought her mother-in-law was a burden, a relic of the past, slowing her down. In one unforgivable moment of cruelty, she used a bucket of cold water to wash away the old woman's dignity. But when her husband came home and saw his mother shivering and broken, he didn't raise his voice or his hand. He did something far more shocking, an act of silent justice that would shatter their world and echo through the neighborhood forever. This story is about a line that was crossed and a lesson that was brutally learned. If you believe that respect for our elders is non-negotiable, comment "family first" right now. The city hummed with a relentless energy, a symphony of car horns, market chatter, and the distant thrum of construction. Inside a modern two-story house in a respectable middle-class neighborhood, a different kind of noise festered. The sound of silence. It was a heavy, suffocating silence that Lillian had grown to despise. She stood by the sleek kitchen island, her acrylic nails tapping an impatient rhythm on the granite countertop. Her gaze drifted to the veranda, where Mama Ruth sat in her wheelchair, a quiet figure silhouetted against the blinding afternoon sun. Lillian's husband, David, had insisted they bring his mother to live with them after a stroke left her partially paralyzed. At first, Lillian had played the part of the dutiful daughter-in-law, smiling for the neighbors and preparing special meals. But the performance had grown exhausting. Mama Ruth wasn't just a person, she was a presence, a constant, gentle reminder of a world Lillian was desperate to escape. A world of tradition, of duty, of smells like medicinal herbs and old books that clung to the air and clashed with her expensive scented candles. She was an anchor, Lillian thought, holding back the shiny, successful life she was trying to build with David. David, for his part, was a good man, perhaps too good. He worked long hours at an engineering firm, his love for Lillian matched only by his profound devotion to the woman who had raised him. He saw his mother's presence as a blessing, a chance to repay a lifetime of love. He was blind, Lillian thought, to the way Mama Ruth's quiet needs chipped away at their time, their privacy, and their future. The first crack appeared over something as small as the scent of liniment. "David, the whole house smells like a hospital," Lillian complained one evening, wrinkling her nose as she walked into the living room. "My clients are coming over for dinner on Friday. It's embarrassing." David looked up from the newspaper, his brow furrowed. "Lillian, it's for her pain." "I don't know," she snapped, "but this isn't the life I signed up for." The words hung in the air, sharp and poisonous. From the corner of the room, Mama Ruth, who had been pretending to sleep, flinched as if struck. She heard everything. In the days that followed, Lillian's resentment began to curdle into cruelty. It started with small things. A cup of tea served lukewarm. A favorite television program switched off mid-sentence. Meals were left on a tray just out of Mama Ruth's easy reach, forcing the old woman to struggle. These were tiny acts of war, invisible to David, who came home tired and just wanted peace. But their neighbor, Mrs. Adebayo, a sharp-eyed widow who spent her afternoons on her own veranda, saw it all. She saw the way Lillian's smile never reached her eyes when she spoke to her mother-in-law. She saw the flicker of triumph on Lillian's face when Mama Ruth struggled. Mrs. Adebayo kept her silence, but she watched and she prayed. Lillian felt the neighbor's gaze like a physical weight, but didn't care. She was suffocating, and she was convinced Mama Ruth was the cause. One night, she whispered to David in bed, "Don't you see? We can't move forward with her here. She's a weight." David turned away from her, his silence a wall she couldn't break. But Lillian had made a decision. The weight had to be lifted, one way or another. The pressure at Lillian's marketing job was immense. A major promotion was on the line, and she was competing against a younger, hungrier colleague. She started bringing her work home, her laptop a permanent fixture on the dining table. The quiet shuffling of Mama Ruth's wheelchair or the low murmur of the television from her room became unbearable intrusions. Lillian began to see her mother-in-law not as a person, but as the living embodiment of all her frustrations. Every dropped spoon, every soft request for water felt like a deliberate attempt to sabotage her focus. David tried to bridge the growing chasm. He'd bring Lillian flowers, suggest date nights, and spend his mornings carefully tending to his mother so Lillian could have the house to herself. But his efforts were like trying to fill a bucket with a hole in it. The resentment just kept leaking out. Lillian's bitterness was a poison that was now tainting every corner of their home. She started making cruel remarks, veiled as jokes. "Mama, you should try to walk more. You'll get bed sores," she'd say, knowing full well the doctors had said Mama Ruth would never walk again. Mama Ruth would just smile a sad, tired smile and say, "God's will, my child." Her patience only infuriated Lillian more. It felt like a judgment, a silent condemnation of her own modern impatience. Mrs. Adebayo, watching from across the way, saw the storm gathering. She saw the light in Mama Ruth's eyes dim a little more each day, and the hardness in Lillian's face crystallize into something ugly and permanent. The promotion Lillian so desperately wanted went to her colleague. The news came on a Friday. Lillian came home radiating a black, toxic anger. She saw Mama Ruth on the veranda, her face turned towards the setting sun, looking peaceful. To Lillian, that peace was a mockery of her own failure. That night, she didn't speak a word to anyone. She just sat in the dark, a plan taking shape in her mind. A plan to finally make Mama Ruth feel as small and powerless as she felt. The following afternoon was brutally hot and humid. The air was thick and still, promising a storm that refused to break. David was stuck in traffic, his return delayed. Lillian was on the phone, pacing back and forth, arguing with a client. On the veranda, Mama Ruth was having her simple lunch of rice and stew. Her hands, weakened by the stroke, trembled slightly, and a small portion of the stew dripped onto the clean, white tiles of the veranda. "Lillian, my dear," she called out softly, her voice frail. "I'm sorry, I've made a small mess." Lillian ended her call abruptly, her face a mask of fury. She stormed to the veranda and looked down at the small red stain on the floor, then at the old woman's apologetic face. Something inside her snapped. The lost promotion, the constant stress, the perceived burden, it all coalesced into a single point of pure, unadulterated rage. "A mess," Lillian hissed, her voice low and dangerous. "You are the mess, old woman. You stain my house. You stain my life." Mama Ruth's eyes widened in shock and hurt. She had never been spoken to with such venom. I didn't mean," she stammered. "Be quiet," Lillian commanded. She turned and marched to the utility closet at the back of the house. The sound of a tap running at full blast echoed through the quiet home. A moment later, she returned, carrying a large plastic bucket filled to the brim with cold water. Mrs. Adebayo, who had been watering her plants, froze, her eyes fixed on the unfolding horror. She saw the terror on Mama Ruth's face as Lillian stood over her, the bucket held high. "You feel hot," Lillian sneered. "You need to cool down. You need to be cleaned." Before Mama Ruth could plead or cry out, Lillian tilted the bucket. A torrent of cold water crashed down over the old woman's head, drenching her hair, her clothes, her food, and her spirit. She gasped, the shock of the cold stealing her breath. Lillian dropped the empty bucket with a loud clatter on the wet tiles. She looked down at the shivering, humiliated woman in the wheelchair and felt a sickening surge of power. Without another word, she turned, slid the glass door to the veranda shut, and left her mother-in-law alone, dripping and broken in the suffocating afternoon heat. When David's car finally pulled into the driveway an hour later, the first thing he noticed was the unnatural quiet. The front door was unlocked, and as he stepped inside, a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning ran down his spine. He called out Lillian's name, but there was no answer. He walked through the living room, and then he saw it. A reflection in the closed glass door to the veranda. A slumped figure in a wheelchair. His heart hammered against his ribs. He slid the door open, and the scene hit him like a physical blow. His mother, Mama Ruth, was soaked to the bone, her head bowed, her body racked with silent, convulsive shivers. A plate of ruined food sat in a puddle at her feet next to an overturned bucket. Her dignity was gone, replaced by a profound and terrible shame. For a moment, David couldn't breathe. He looked from his shivering mother to the dry, pristine living room, where he could now see Lillian standing in the shadows of the kitchen, watching him, her face a mixture of defiance and fear. He didn't need to ask what happened. The story was written in the puddles on the floor and the devastation in his mother's eyes. Something inside David, a cord of patience and hope that had been fraying for months, finally snapped. But it didn't release rage, it released an unnerving, absolute calm. He walked past Lillian as if she were a piece of furniture. He knelt before his mother, his movements gentle and deliberate. "Mama," he whispered, his voice thick with a pain that was deeper than anger. He stripped off his jacket and wrapped it around her frail shoulders. He carefully wheeled her inside, into her bedroom, avoiding Lillian's gaze. He helped her out of her wet clothes, dressed her in a warm, dry nightgown, and covered her with every blanket he could find. He sat by her bed, holding her cold hand, until her shivering finally subsided and she fell into an exhausted, troubled sleep. Only then did David emerge from the room. He walked into the living room where Lillian was still standing, now wringing her hands, the defiance on her face having melted away into uncertainty. She opened her mouth to speak, to offer an excuse, a justification. But David raised a single hand, and she fell silent. His face was a void. The love, the frustration, the warmth she was used to seeing there, it was all gone. All that remained was a chilling, quiet finality. "Pack a bag," he said, his voice barely a whisper, yet it carried the weight of a death sentence. "What? David, I can explain. It was the heat, the stress." "Pack a bag," he repeated, each word a chip of ice. "We are leaving!" Lillian's heart sank. "A weekend away? To cool off? Where are we going?" she asked, a sliver of hope in her voice. David finally looked at her, and his eyes were those of a stranger. "Not we," he said. "Me and my mother. I am taking her to my sister's house tonight, a place where she will be honored, not humiliated." He walked to their bedroom and began pulling a suitcase from the top of the wardrobe, not for him, but for his mother. Lillian followed him, panic rising in her throat. "David, please, don't do this. I'm sorry. I am so sorry." He continued packing his mother's things, his movements efficient and detached. He folded her clothes, her prayer books, her photographs. When he was done, he turned to Lillian. "The cruelty I saw today, Lillian, it wasn't in the water. The water will dry. The cruelty was in your heart. And I don't know how to live with that." He picked up the suitcase and his car keys. "This house, the career, the status you want so badly, it's all yours now," he said, his voice devoid of all emotion. "But from this day forward, you will have it all alone." He walked out of the bedroom, gently woke his mother, and with a tenderness that broke what was left of Lillian's heart, he lifted her from the bed and carried her out of the house, leaving Lillian standing in the middle of the silent, empty home she had fought so hard for. In the end, she had gotten exactly what she wanted. She was free of the burden, and she had never been more alone. Because she had learned, in the cruelest way possible, that those who do not respect the past will never find peace in their future. What is the true price of ambition when it costs us our humanity? Lillian chased a future so fiercely that she tried to erase the past, only to find herself completely alone in an empty present. She learned that a home is built not with granite countertops and expensive furniture, but with love, compassion, and respect for those who came before us. And you? Was David's reaction justified, or was it too harsh? What would you have done in his place? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective matters. And now, if you are ready for another story that will challenge your heart and mind, a new one is already waiting for you on your screen. Click play, and let's uncover the next truth together.